His corpse collapsed, empty, and the glyphs shifted, rearranging themselves around his body into new lines of text. The captain ordered discipline, ordered silence, ordered faith. His words were swallowed by the cavern, repeated back in voices not his: secure, establish, maintain, await, always the same, always deeper. He barked for torches, for auspex, for order, but every command came back with echoes layered until his own voice drowned beneath them. The tech priest fell to his knees, mechadendrites thrashing, binary screams shredding from his vox grill. His auspex glowed white-hot, printing strip after strip of paper, until his hands blistered, each line curling into spirals that spelled nothing human. He held them up as though they were relics, shrieking that the machine had seen the reader, had catalogued the page, and had counted the ink. Then his implants ruptured, sparks bursting, his skull cooking in steam. The strips fluttered into the pit, disappearing into black. We staggered back, clinging to one another, staring into the abyss. Shapes moved within it. No fog this time, no echoes, shapes vast and slow, shifting like muscles beneath skin. They did not climb, they did not attack, they only stirred, observed, waited, as though they had been written centuries ago, and were simply waiting for us to turn the page. The captain stood tall, helmet off, eyes wild. He raised the parchment tube high, screaming that this was the purpose, this was the boundary, this was the assignment. Every guardsman fears, not to hold land, not to fight enemies, to hold this pit, to hold it closed with bodies and faith and obedience. His voice cracked, his hand shook, but he still shouted it, because orders were all he had left. And we, standing on the edge of that breathing wound, staring into the abyss of letters older than our species, knew the truth. The pit was not a place, it was a page, and we had been stationed as ink. The pit breathed. Every moment we stood upon its spiraling ledges, the air shivered against our skin, as if each inhalation came not from lungs, but from the stone itself, dragging our thoughts into rhythm with its cadence. We tried to ignore it, tried to count steps, tried to repeat catechisms under our breath, but every pause between words left space for something else to slip inside. That was when the whispers began, not from the fog, not from the vox, but from the stone. At first it was vibration, a low murmur we mistook for echoes, boots on rock, lanterns swaying, the scrape of shovels still dangling from harnesses. Yet the sound carried intent, syllables forming at the edge of comprehension, words half-formed but undeniable. Some men claimed it was merely the cavern's shape bending our noise back upon us. Others pressed palms flat to the glyph-carved walls and swore they felt voices moving beneath their hands, like insects scuttling under parchment. I pressed my ear to the stone once. I should not have. The whisper slithered directly into my skull, bypassing flesh and air. It was not one voice but many, layered atop each other, reciting fragments of orders I already knew. Secure, maintain, await. But underneath, beneath the litany, other words bled through. Name yourself, write to yourself, give ink, give shape. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The wall pulsed faintly as though pleased I had listened. Others were not as resistant. Trooper Darren leaned against the cavern wall too long. When we pulled him back, his eyes stared blank, pupils wide, lips moving silently. We thought he had gone mad until his hands began moving, scratching letters into the dirt with broken fingernails. Not Imperial Gothic, not Binharic, something older, loops and spirals that hurt the eyes. He did not stop even when his nails split and bled. We had to drag him away. His fingers kept moving in the air as if still writing. The priest fell to his knees, clutching his book shut, rocking back and forth like a child. "Do not be legible," he moaned. "Do not be legible. It is writing to us. We are the scripture." When the captain ordered him to silence, the priest laughed, his voice cracking. "You cannot order silence when the stone itself speaks. You cannot order a book to stop reading its own page." The captain struck him across the mouth. The priest thanked him through blood. Our auspex printed new strips of paper, each covered in spirals and jagged marks. The tech adept, What remained of him was gone, burned from within, but the machine continued on its own, spitting strips as though possessed. Men avoided touching them, yet some could not resist. They held the paper close, squinting at the markings, and moments later began muttering the same shapes aloud. We executed the first man who did it, but more followed, always more. The whispers grew stronger the deeper we descended. The spiral staircase curved inward, leading us closer to the abyss. The glyphs along the walls shifted as we passed, rearranging themselves like sentences editing mid-breath. Once I saw my own name spelled out along the stone, each letter pulsing faintly. I blinked, and it was gone. But the echo of recognition remained. I never told anyone. I feared that to acknowledge it would give it permanence. One squad refused to go deeper. They dropped tools, sat cross-legged upon the ledge, refusing to move. They said the stone had promised them safety if they stayed. The captain ordered them dragged along. The commissar was gone, so no executions silenced their defiance. We tied ropes around their waists and forced them downward. Halfway down, the ropes went slack. We pulled, but nothing returned. Not bodies, not screams, only dust trickling upward as though exhaled by the pit. The whispers began to address us directly. No longer fragments, full sentences, though not always coherent. Step further, step closer, ink must flow, ink must answer. Name yourselves to remain. Silence is erasure. Some men obeyed, speaking their names aloud. The fog answered in kind, repeating the names in perfect imitation, layering them onto the cavern until the stone itself seemed to wear them. Those men vanished within days, their gear left behind, their voices lingering in the walls. Sleep became impossible. At night the whispers grew louder, pressing against skulls like a tide rising higher and higher, flooding thought. Some men stuffed their ears with cloth, others cut themselves, carving lines into flesh as distraction. The medic wept openly, unable to tend wounds that were not physical. "This is not madness," he whispered once. "Madness would be mercy. This is a transcription." The captain held fast longer than the rest, though even he faltered. He stood upon a ledge overlooking the abyss, parchment tube in hand, repeating the same words: secure, establish, maintain, await. The stone whispered them back, but louder, heavier, until his voice drowned beneath theirs. He raised the parchment as though it might shield him, as though it were the Emperor's own decree. But the whispers only laughed. I swear it. The stone laughed. Then Trooper Marek broke. He screamed into the darkness. "What are you?" His voice cracked, echoing down the spiral. The whispers fell silent, utterly silent. For one breath, for one heartbeat, the entire pit ceased to breathe. Then it answered, "We are the page. You are the ink. Please do not modify the page. Ink only fills lines. Ink does not endure. Ink only stains." Marek clawed at his face, tearing skin, screaming he did not want to be ink. The captain shot him through the skull, but even as his body fell, the whispers repeated his final words back at us. "I do not want to be ink. I do not want to be ink. I do not want to be ink." Louder, heavier, until the cavern itself shook with it. From then on, the whispers did not stop. They followed us back to camp, into sleep, into silence. The fog echoed them, the vox repeated them, our own voices carried them when we tried to speak. And the truth settled upon us like a weight we could no longer deny. The assignment Every Guardsman Fears was never about holding land. It was about holding silence against something that demanded we be read. And the stone had begun reading in earnest. The first body returned by the pit was not carried back by hands but exhaled, laid neatly at the edge of camp, as though a page torn free from a book and placed before us to read. It was Trooper Darren, the one who had written with his bleeding fingers until dragged away. He had vanished days before, swallowed by silence, his rope slack and dust in place of flesh. Now he lay whole, uniform immaculate, boots polished, rifle clean. His face was peaceful, his lips closed, his eyes shut, but his chest did not rise, and no breath fogged in the gray air. The captain ordered the medic to examine him. The medic resisted, whispering prayers under his breath, But duty is duty, and so he obeyed. He cut open the uniform, peeled it away, and placed a scalpel to the skin. The blade met no resistance. It parted him like parchment. No blood welled from the incision. No muscle revealed itself beneath. Only layers, thin, pale, fibrous sheets, each marked faintly with ink. Words written in no language we knew. Symbols spiraled across flesh, as though his body were a manuscript bound in skin. The medic trembled, scalpel slipping from his hand. "There is no heart," he whispered. "No lungs, no organs, only pages, pages stacked where flesh should be." He tried to peel one free, and it came loose easily, fluttering in his grip, soft and dry, the letters crawling faintly as though alive. The page dissolved in his hand, leaving black dust that stained his fingers and refused to wash away. He fell to his knees, sobbing. He was rewritten. The medic choked. Not killed, rewritten. The captain barked for silence, ordered the body burned, but the priest lunged forward, snatching a strip of flesh page before the flames took it. He clutched it to his chest, eyes wide, whispering, "Proof, scripture. The emperor does not speak here. This world speaks, and we are its gospel." When the captain tried to seize it, the priest fled, vanishing into the mist. His laughter echoed back long after he was gone. More bodies followed. Not all returned, but enough. The pit exhaled them, one by one, each whole, each immaculate, each with flesh transformed into parchment. One man's skin bore maps drawn in spirals. Another's bones were hollow tubes filled with ink that dripped endlessly, staining the ground where he lay. Another still had words carved into his teeth, glyphs revealed when his mouth was pried open, whispers escaping between clenched jaws. The surgeon kept notes, despite his horror. He dissected carefully, recording each anomaly, though his handwriting grew shaky, his words incoherent. Vascular systems replaced by scriptural veins, nervous tissue overwritten by text. They are not corpses, they are drafts, revisions, failed paragraphs. He burned each body after dissection, but the smoke coiled into shapes, letters rising into the sky before dissolving. Men stopped watching the pyres. The sight of words written in fire broke too many minds. One night the surgeon did not emerge from his tent. We found him slumped over his desk, pages torn from his own body spread before him. He had cut into himself, peeling strips of skin from his arms, from his chest, from his thighs, each marked with words he swore were not there before he carved them. His journal lay beside him, open to a final note scrawled in ink and blood alike. "I was always text. I was never a man. They are only reminding me." He was still alive when we found him, but he begged to be burned. The captain obliged. The flames whispered his name as they consumed him. After that, no one trusted flesh. Men scratched themselves raw, searching for words beneath their skin. Some found them. One trooper carved too deeply, exposing ribs marked with looping letters. He screamed until the commissar, no, until the captain now, for the commissar was gone, shot him in mercy. Another cut his own tongue, claiming words were inscribed upon it. He spat blood in arcs, laughing until he choked. The Auspex strips grew worse. No longer spirals alone, but words, our names, coordinates of our camp, orders written before we received them. The machine prophesied our duty hours before the captain gave command. When questioned, the tech adept's replacement only whispered, "It is reading us faster than we can live. We are already written. We are just catching up." Morale shattered. No one slept. No one ate. The rations tasted of ash, of ink, of paper fibers. Some men chewed regardless, swallowing dust willingly, as though becoming part of the scripture would save them. Others starved, lips cracked, eyes hollow, whispering, better blank than legible. The captain tried to hold us together. He recited the parchment orders every morning, voice raw, throat bleeding from repetition. Secure, establish, maintain, await. But the men laughed now when he said it, their voices layered with the whispers of the stone. They mocked him not with defiance, but with resignation. "You are repeating what it already knows," one trooper said. "You are ink pretending to command ink." The captain shot him. The whispers repeated his final words anyway, louder, louder, until the cavern shook. By the time the surgeon's report reached its final line, we already knew the truth. The assignment Every Guardsman Fears was not to fight an enemy. It was to hold still while being erased, to guard the margins of a book that was writing itself with our flesh, to maintain position not on ground, but on a page. And the stone was turning faster, reading faster, whispering faster. We could not stop it. The rations spoiled overnight, not in the way food usually spoils, not with mold or rot or insects, not with sour stench or crawling infestation. No, they spoiled by becoming nothing. The protein bricks we unwrapped in the morning dissolved in our fingers, collapsing into grey powder that drifted upward instead of down, caught in a breathless air current that moved only toward the pit. Canteens still sloshed with weight, but when uncapped, the liquid shimmered like mercury before evaporating into mist, seeping away in tendrils that coiled around wrists and vanished into the soil. We gathered at the supply crates, pried them open, and found them hollow. Not empty, hollow. Their interiors had collapsed inward, wood warped into thin paper-like walls, ink bleeding through the grain in spirals. The quartermaster fell to his knees, clutching his head, swearing he had checked them hours before, that the stock was untouched, counted, and sealed. He tore at his uniform until his chest was bare, searching for words carved into his skin, because that was the only explanation left. The supplies had been read, and reading had erased them. Hunger arrived swiftly. Not the slow gnawing hunger of campaigns past, not the weakness that sets in after days of poor rations. This was sharper, hungrier, as if the absence of food carried a weight heavier than starvation itself. Stomachs clenched and growled, but no sound carried. Even hunger was swallowed by the fog. Men licked the dust from their fingers, desperate, though it burned their throats and left their tongues dry. One trooper chewed his own boot leather until blood dripped from his lips, and he wept, whispering, "At least it tastes of something." The captain tried to ration what remained, though rationing absence is madness. He parceled out crumbs of dust, droplets of water caught in canteen seams, dividing nothing among too many. His voice broke as he ordered us to endure. "Relief will come," he said, but even he did not believe it. The parchment gave no relief, only repetition. Secure, establish, maintain, await, always await, await, hunger, await absence, await the page turning. The priest returned then, staggering from the fog, his robes stained with ink, his eyes wide and hollow. He carried no book now. His hands were his scripture, across his palms, across his chest, across his face. Words had been carved, shallow at first, then deep. He smiled through cracked lips, held his arms wide, and declared the rations were never meant for us. We are the rations. The assignment feeds the pit with us. The captain shot him without hesitation, but his body dissolved before it hit the ground, crumbling into ash that swirled upward, drifting into the cavern like offering smoke. That night men tried to eat soil. They clawed it with bare hands, packed it into their mouths, chewed until their gums split. But the soil was not soil. It was parchment ground too fine, fibrous and bitter, scratching tongues, drawing blood. They spat it out in streams of black grit, lips split, teeth loose. Still they tried. Hunger leaves no pride. Others went further. One squad killed a deserter, stripping his flesh, carving strips with knives. They cooked it over a lantern flame, the fat sizzling, the smell heavy. We gagged, turned away, but hunger drew eyes back. They tore chunks with teeth, chewed, swallowed, and then they screamed. For the flesh was not flesh. It crumbled into paper pulp in their mouths, bleeding ink across their tongues, scrawling letters across their teeth. They spat black sludge, retching, clawing at tongues until they bled. They died within hours, stomachs swollen, bellies splitting open to reveal pages written inside. The surgeon's journal remained, passed from hand to hand though none wanted it. In the margin of his last entry he had written, "Hunger is not deprivation. Hunger is editing. The pit starves us so it can rewrite us faster." We believed him. Hunger was not killing us. It was preparing us, stripping us down, erasing distractions, leaving only blankness to be filled. On the 5th day without food, men began vanishing faster, not into fog, not into dust. They sat in silence, eyes closed, lips moving faintly. Then they slumped forward, skin already pale, bodies weightless. When pried open, they were hollow, not rewritten like before. Hollow, as if hunger had taken their insides and offered them ahead of schedule. The whispers grew louder each time, pleased chanting. Ink flows faster when the page is empty. The captain tried to inspire us with memories of other campaigns, of worlds where men endured worse, but no one listened. His words rang thin. They tasted like ash. Even he faltered when he saw his own reflection in the ink pooling at the bottom of a cracked canteen, his lips moving in silence though he swore he had not spoken. Some men prayed, some begged, some tore strips from their own flesh, chewing them raw. But flesh tasted of ink now, always ink. There was no food left in this place, not in crates, not in soil, not in bodies. Hunger was the assignment's final order, not to starve us to death, but to starve us into being read. That night, the whispers changed, no longer commands, no longer imperatives, questions, direct, intimate. What will you eat when nothing remains? Will you eat words? Will you eat yourselves? The fog pressed close, curling around us, and the pit breathed louder, eager. We did not answer aloud. We did not dare, but every man knew the truth. Soon silence would be the only ration left, and silence was what the assignment had been feeding on from the very beginning. The chaplain had once been the loudest voice among us, louder even than the commissar, louder than the captain's orders, louder than the roar of bombardments that used to fall upon trenches we dug on saner worlds. His Crozius had struck stone as he preached, sparks rising in rhythm with the thunder of his litanies, and his sermons had turned fear into fire, despair into duty, silence into hymns. But the pit was not like those worlds, and the whispers were not like artillery, and faith here was not shield but parchment, thin, flammable, ready to burn at the faintest spark. At first he fought the fog with words. He led us in prayer by torchlight, his voice trembling but fierce, quoting scripture until his throat bled, chanting litanies of defiance, calling upon the emperor's gaze to pierce the mist. We shouted with him, desperate, clinging to the sound of our own unity, but every word echoed back from the cavern walls, twisted, layered, spoken in other voices. His prayers were repeated in the tones of the vanished, in the cadence of the captain, in the whisper of the commissar, who was no longer with us. The stone mocked him, made scripture into parody. Still he preached. But repetition erodes. Each night his voice faltered sooner. His verses shortened, his litanies stumbled. He began skipping lines, forgetting words he had known since boyhood. And when the priest forgets, the flock trembles. One night he opened his book to recite, and the words inside were gone. Not faded, not smudged, gone, blank parchment. He screamed, clawing at pages, tearing them free, holding them up for all to see. Blank, blank, his voice cracked. It has stolen the emperor's word. He fell silent after that, silent for 3 nights. He sat with the book clasped shut against his chest, rocking, lips moving without sound. Men avoided him, muttering that to stand too close was to be erased faster. But hunger and whispers pressed harder, and even silence was dangerous. Some begged him to speak again, to anchor them, and so he did. But his words had changed. When he opened his mouth, the emperor was gone. No hymns, no catechism, no sermons of fire and duty. Instead, he spoke of the page, of the reader, of the assignment. His voice was cracked and raw, but certain, reverent. We are not his flock, we are his margins. We are not his soldiers, we are his letters. He raised his Crozius high, its skull shining faint in lantern light, and struck the ground. The stone pulsed in answer. He smiled as though rewarded. The captain shouted at him down, struck him across the mouth, and demanded silence. The chaplain laughed through blood, teeth red, eyes burning. "You cannot silence scripture when the page itself preaches," he said, and the whispers echoed him, layering his words back over us until the cavern walls themselves trembled with laughter. His sermons grew worse. He stopped preaching to us. He preached to the pit. Standing at the spiral's edge, arms wide, he shouted into the abyss, his voice shaking, cracking, but filled with zeal. He called it reader. He called it author. He begged it to turn the page, to finish the sentence, to use us well. Men wept, begging him to stop, to remember faith, but his voice grew louder still. The first to follow him were the desperate, hungry men, hollow men, men whose names had already been whispered by the stone. They stood beside him, nodding, repeating his words. "We are margins," they said. "We are ink." They began carving verses into their flesh with bayonets, scratching spirals into arms, into faces. The chaplain kissed their wounds as blessings. When they bled, the blood ran black. The whispers thundered. Pleased, the captain tried to intervene. He dragged the chaplain away from the edge, locked him inside a tent, and posted guards. But the guards reported whispers from within, whispers that seeped through canvas and mind alike. By morning, the guards themselves knelt before the chaplain, carving words into their hands, grinning through pain. The captain shot them all. The chaplain laughed as their bodies burned, smoke curling upward into letters only some of us could read. We called him broken then, but broken is the wrong word. He was not broken, he was converted. He had traded the emperor's silence for the pit's answers, and men desperate for answers followed him. His congregation grew even as the captain shot them down. You cannot kill whispers with bullets. You cannot burn faith that feeds on fire. The final sermon came at dawn, or what we named dawn in this grey world. The chaplain walked into the fog, Crozius raised, his voice booming. He preached that the assignment was holy, that the emperor had sent us not to resist, but to offer ourselves. He preached that vanishing was not death but promotion, a word erased here to be written clearer elsewhere. His voice grew louder as the fog swallowed him, as the whispers layered over him, until we could no longer tell which was his voice and which was theirs. Then silence. His Crozius was returned that night, laid neatly at the camp's edge, its skull polished clean, words etched into the metal that shifted when we tried to read them. None touched it, none moved it. It lay there still, gleaming faintly, humming when the pit inhaled. The chaplain was gone. His sermons remained. Men muttered to them in sleep. Men mouthed them while standing watch. Men carved them into the dirt without knowing why. His faith was gone, but his voice had become the stone's voice. And we understood then. The chaplain had not broken. We had. The captain had endured longer than most. He carried the parchment tube always, clutching it to his chest as though the act alone might anchor him, repeating the orders written inside with lips that bled from ceaseless recitation. Secure, establish, maintain, await. He spoke them even in his sleep, whispered them even as he marched, and breathed them like oxygen. And yet the men no longer listened, not because they doubted him, but because the whispers had begun repeating him louder, clearer, until his voice was only the echo of an echo, a puppet of words already inscribed. His authority was parchment thin, and the stone was already reading through him. The fracture came at dusk. The fog had thickened again, curling around our perimeter like a tide that would not recede, and the chaplain's converts knelt before it, carving spirals into their arms with knives, chanting his words in ragged unison. We are margins, we are ink, we are scripture. Their voices layered with the whispers until camp trembled with the sound. The captain shouted for silence. No one obeyed. The converts did not even turn their heads. They belonged to another commander now. The captain raised his last pistol. For a moment he hesitated, shoulders sagging as though the weapon weighed the same as the entire assignment. Then he fired. The first convert collapsed, chest burned open, ink instead of blood spilling onto the ground. The whispers roared, repeating the man's death cry until it rattled teeth, until it echoed from every wall of the cavern. Still the captain fired, bolt after bolt, each strike dropping another convert, until 5 lay dead in the dirt, their wounds leaking not flesh but black script that curled and faded into dust. The camp froze. We had seen executions before, too many to count, but never like this. Never of men who were not deserting, not fleeing, not begging for mercy, but praying. Not to the emperor, no, but praying still. And for the first time the captain's weapon felt less like discipline and more like betrayal. The survivors screamed. Some begged. Some rushed the captain, only to be cut down by his pistol, each shot shaking his frame, each detonation cracking his voice as he shouted. They are not men. They are already words. But his voice shook, his eyes streamed, his hands trembled. He did not believe it. He only hoped for it. The medic vomited into the dirt. The Vox officer dropped his set and wept openly. Even the veterans, men who had survived world burning, who had watched comrades flayed alive by Xenos, who had crawled through oceans of blood, turned pale and silent, not because men had died, but because the captain himself had crossed the line. He had fired on his own. He had declared the boundary not at the cordon, not at the pit, not at the fog, but inside the regiment. The whispers feasted on it. They roared louder than ever, voices layered, jubilant. Ink flows faster when it bleeds itself. Ink flows truer when command edits its own sentence. The words pulsed through the ground, rattling stakes, twisting cords. Some swore they saw the glyphs rearrange around the corpses, spelling out the captain's name. He fired again in panic, vaporizing the script, but it only reformed elsewhere, curling upward into the air. That night no one slept. Men whispered mutiny in hushed tones, mutiny not against orders but against erasure. They feared the captain more than the fog, for the fog would take them silently, but the captain would burn them alive while they still screamed. Hunger gnawed sharper, and men glared at the supply crates as though the nothing inside might return if only blood was spilled upon it. The captain paced camp endlessly, pistol always drawn, shouting litanies through cracked lips. Secure, establish, maintain, await. He repeated them until his voice broke, until silence answered him louder. His hands shook so violently that some whispered he would turn the pistol on himself. But no, he did not. He saved his bullets for us. The first execution had changed everything. The assignment no longer needed to consume us one by one in silence. We would consume ourselves, line by line, brother by brother, until the regiment was nothing but ash drifting into the pit. And in that ash, letters waited, eager to be written. The pit had shown us its surface, the spiraling ledges that coiled downward like a staircase carved by something too vast to need stairs, but it had not yet demanded we enter its throat. That demand came through the auspex first, strips of paper curling endlessly, numbers printed in spirals, coordinates pointing downward, always downward, until the machine itself overheated and the tech priest replacement swore its prayers were no longer being answered by the Omnissiah, but by the stone itself. The captain had no choice. Orders are orders, even when they are written by walls that breathe. We were told to descend. We tied ropes, checked lanterns, strapped rifles across our chests, though every preparation felt hollow. Las guns hummed in ready mode, but seemed lighter, insubstantial, as though the stone had stripped them of weight, of meaning. We tested torches, and the flames bent downward instead of up, pulled toward the abyss. Men muttered oaths, some in defiance, some in surrender. None sounded convincing. The first step into the tunnels was like stepping into water. The air thickened, dense, clinging to skin, dragging breath from lungs. The sound warped instantly. Voices stretched thin, syllables trailing into echoes that bent around corners we had not yet reached. Boots struck stone with muffled weight, each step followed by a half step, a sound not made by us, always a fraction behind. We looked back often, rifles raised, but the tunnel remained empty, spirals of glyphs pulsing faintly along the walls. The deeper we went, the more the light rebelled. Lanterns dimmed, torches sputtered. Shadows did not stretch away from flame but curled back toward it, clinging to the wick as though trying to smother it. Faces appeared only in fragments, half a cheek, an eye, a jaw, while the rest of a man's form blurred into black. More than once I mistook shadow for comrade, and comrade for shadow. The whispers returned stronger here, not the faint murmur of stone, not the mockery of fog, but direct, closer, deeper. Ink must know the margin, ink must fill the line. They came from every direction, vibrating through boots, through rifles, through ribs. Some men pressed hands over their ears, but the voices grew louder within skulls. Others began to answer unconsciously, lips moving in silence, shaping words they could not understand. We passed chambers branching from the main spiral, each wider than the last, each lined with glyphs that shifted as lanterns swung. In one, the floor was littered with bones, too many to count, stacked, layered. At first we thought them human, but closer inspection revealed otherwise. Spines bent wrong, skulls too elongated, ribs fused into lattices like cages. The medic whispered they were not remains but attempts, drafts, revisions. The pit had been writing long before we arrived. Another chamber pulsed with wet light, its walls slick with ink that dripped in rivulets, pooling on the ground. One trooper stepped too close. His boots sank into the black liquid, and he screamed as it clung, climbing his legs, etching spirals into flesh. We fired, vaporizing the muck, but it was too late. When we dragged him free, his body was parchment, his veins were ink, his mouth whispered words none of us understood, until his skull caved under the captain's shot. The walls glowed faintly in approval. Deeper still, the tunnels bent light outright. Lantern beams curved around corners, shining on walls we had not yet reached. Sometimes they reflected our own faces back at us, not in mirrors but in living stone, eyes wide, mouths moving just a fraction behind. One man shot his reflection. The wall absorbed the blast, flared red, and his reflection's chest bloomed with a wound. The man himself fell, throat split, bleeding black. We stepped over him quickly. The captain did not speak. Fatigue grew unnatural. Legs trembled though we had marched further on worse worlds. Shoulders sagged though our packs carried little. The medic swore our bodies were intact, but our shadows grew thin, stretched, fading at the edges. He muttered that we were being edited, thinned line by line. Some men refused to walk in front of lanterns, afraid of seeing how little of themselves remained. At the sixth descent, the tunnels widened into a cathedral hollow, its ceiling lost in black. Pillars rose like ribs, carved with spirals that pulsed faintly. At the chamber's center lay an altar of stone, smooth, flat, glowing faint. We approached cautiously, rifles raised, but no enemy stirred, only the whispers. Right, place ink, sign name. The captain stepped forward, parchment tube in hand, as though drawn. He placed it on the altar. The stone pulsed brighter, words shifting across the tube's surface. We shouted for him to stop, but his face was blank, his eyes wide. He whispered, "Orders are written, orders must return to the page." Then the whispers screamed, the cavern shook, pillars groaned, dust rained from above. The altar flared with light, so bright it burned eyes. We dragged the captain back, tore the parchment tube from his hands. It was hot, branding palms, letters searing into skin. The man who touched it first screamed until his throat tore, his flesh smoking where the words burned through him. He collapsed in silence, body blank, not even ash remaining, only a curl of black dust, drifting downward, toward the abyss. We carried the captain away, his body limp, his lips still moving in whispers. The parchment tube pulsed faintly in his hands, glowing alive. No man dared touch it again. We left it strapped to him, for fear it would burn through us as well. The tunnels pressed deeper, always deeper. Each step is harder than the last. Each breath is heavier. We began to lose count of the time. Watches spun, chronometers cracked, auspex strips printed loops without end. Men whispered that we were not walking downward, but inward, that the tunnels spiraled not into stone, but into sentences, into a paragraph that had no ending. And when we reached the next chamber, I believed it. It was not stone anymore. The walls were parchment, stretched taut, fibers trembling with breath. Ink seeped from them in rivulets, dripping onto the floor. Words rearranged themselves with every flicker of light. Some spelled our names. Some spelled nothing. Some spelled nothing. Some spelled truths we could not endure. One man read his own name aloud. His body collapsed instantly, flat, blank like a page erased. His rifle fell beside him, still humming. We did not touch it. We still descended. Because orders are orders. Because fear of punishment means nothing here. Because silence is worse. Because once the assignment has written your name, there is no erasing it, and the tunnels whispered louder with every step. Deeper, 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 until the last page turns. The tunnels bent us downward in spirals that never ended, each turn identical to the last, until time itself grew circular, and every step felt like walking a sentence already spoken. We no longer knew how many days we had marched beneath the pit, nor how many men still marched beside us, for names slipped quicker from memory than breath from lungs. Only one thing was certain: something watched. At first it was the feeling every soldier knows, that prickling at the back of the neck, that instinct that an enemy's scope rests upon you, that unease you cannot explain. We laughed bitterly when someone whispered it aloud, because here laughter was rebellion, and rebellion was all we had left. But soon unease hardened into certainty. The feeling was not paranoia, it was pressure. A gaze, heavy, deliberate, unblinking. We saw it in the shadows. Lanterns sputtered and flickered, and in those brief breaks, silhouettes lingered longer than they should. A man would move his head, and the shadow would stay still for a heartbeat before catching up. Another would lift his rifle, and the black outline in the wall would raise something else, something not a weapon, something shaped like a quill. One trooper shot his own shadow. The flash seared against stone, and for a moment the wall recoiled like flesh, leaving a black scorch shaped like an eye. The whispers laughed. Breathing grew louder in the tunnels. Not our own, though our chests heaved with exhaustion. Something else. Breaths vast and patient, exhalations timed with lantern flickers, inhalations that tugged at our hair, our straps, our skin. Men swore they felt air pulled through pores, as though they were nothing more than punctures in parchment. One night, on a ledge too narrow for sleep, I woke to find my squad staring outward into black, their heads tilted in unison. They whispered the same phrase: "It blinks when we blink." The captain denied it, though his voice trembled. He ordered us forward, deeper still, repeating the parchment words like shields: secure, establish, maintain, await. But the words rang hollow, bouncing off walls that glistened with glyphs rearranging themselves into eyes, each sigil opening and closing like lids. We marched through corridors lined with vision, every surface watching, every symbol blinking, and the whispers grew louder. Ink is only seen when read. You are being read. You are legible. You are legible. Some men cracked under the weight. One trooper gouged his own eyes out, screaming he would not be read, that blindness would make him blank again. He bled black, ink spilling down his face. His body collapsed, and the whispers crooned in approval. Blank pages accept ink easiest. We burned him, but his ashes formed letters in the air, spelling words none of us dared speak aloud. Another trooper ran, sprinting into the dark without a lantern. His footsteps echoed, faded, then returned, but not his own. We heard him screaming, closer, closer, until he stumbled back into the light. His face was not his. His features had been rearranged into letters, cheeks forming curves, jaw forming lines, eyes nothing but punctuation. He opened his mouth, and pages fluttered out, spilling across the floor. The captain shot him, and still the pages twitched until they curled into dust. We stopped speaking after that. Words were dangerous. Words drew eyes sharper than lanterns. Silence became armor, though silence was no protection, for the whispers filled it anyway. They grew louder, deeper, asking questions we could not bear. What is your sentence? What is your ending? Who will read you when you are gone? Men bit their tongues bloody to keep from answering. The blood dripped in letters. Sleep became impossible. When eyelids closed, visions came, faces bending in the stone, eyes opening inside our skulls, gazes piercing marrow. I dreamed of standing upon a page, my boots bleeding ink, and above me a quill the size of a titan poised to strike. I woke up gasping, certain the dream had not been mine, but it was. Then came proof. In one chamber, we found carvings, deep, deliberate etchings across the stone. They were us, not likenesses, not statues, but depictions of us as we were that moment. Every man in formation, rifles raised, lanterns held. I saw myself carved into the wall, mouth open in silent gasp, hand clutching lascan exactly as I did. The carving blinked. My own face blinked from the stone. Men screamed, shot their own images. The walls bled black. The whispers roared. You are being observed. You are paragraphs in motion. You are characters etched already. You cannot escape observation. You cannot escape reading. The captain fell to his knees then, clutching the parchment tube, shouting that the Emperor watched us always, that his gaze was shield and light. But the whispers drowned him, layered, mocking not Emperor, reader, not a shield, eye, not light, ink. The captain wept openly. For the first time, his orders faltered. We staggered on, deeper, silence shattering in whimpers and curses. We knew something was watching. We felt its gaze in marrow, in breath, in the weight of our steps. And as shadows bent sharper, as glyphs blinked more frequently, as walls carved our faces faster, the truth gnawed us raw. The assignment every guardsman fears was not to guard a boundary, not to hold a line, not to fight an enemy. It was to endure being watched, to be read alive, to be stared into oblivion by something vast and endless, something for whom we were never soldiers at all, only text. And worse, we were not near the end of its reading. We were still in the middle of its paragraph. The first shift was subtle. So subtle that at first we blamed our own exhaustion, our hollow bellies, our ragged nerves. The tunnel bent slightly differently than it had before, an angle sharper, a slope steeper, a glyph pattern rearranged. We told ourselves it was memory fraying, confusion born of hunger. But when the Auspex spat its strip of data, the coordinates folded over themselves, spirals tightening inward until the machine registered us as standing in two places at once. The tech priest's replacement vomited black bile into his palms and whispered that the machine was not broken, it was being corrected. We pressed onward anyway, because orders are orders, because retreat had no direction left, because to stop moving was to invite the gaze of stone eyes that blinked with every hesitation. But the further we marched, the more blatant the shifts became. A turn taken to the left returned us to the right. A straight corridor looped us back upon ourselves. Markings carved by knives into the wall appeared ahead of us hours before we reached them, as though time itself had folded to remind us that we were not lost. We were written. The captain ordered maps redrawn. He commanded the Vox officer to track each step, each corridor, each curve, but the lines bent as they were inked. Charts filled with spirals instead of paths. Grids curled inward like snails. One page bore the shape of an eye so perfectly rendered, no hand could have drawn it by chance. The captain tore the page to shreds. The shreds rearranged themselves in his hands. He burned them, and the ash rose upward, forming the same spiral in the air. Outside the tunnels, the surface betrayed us too. Patrols sent above returned to camp hours later, claiming to have walked straight, yet they staggered in from the opposite direction. The horizon folded, landmarks shifted, ridges collapsed into plains that rose again moments later. Even the fog bent with the changes, pressing closer on one side, then withdrawing, then pressing again, until men swore they were walking through the breath of something enormous, inhaling and exhaling the terrain itself. By the third day of shifts, discipline broke further. Men tied cords around their waists, stringing lines from camp to tunnels, but the cords bent back into knots, twisting into letters. Some refused to move at all, choosing instead to sit cross-legged, whispering that maps were irrelevant, that movement was an illusion. The captain executed two for refusal, their bodies crumpling into dust before they hit the floor. The whispers roared with laughter. Ink edits itself. Ink revisions. Ink deletes. The medic muttered constantly, his voice broken, eyes sunken. "We are not walking," he said. "We are being carried. Each step is a sentence, each corridor a phrase. We are not travelers, we are rearranged. The map does not shift, the map is being rewritten." He scratched diagrams into the dirt, spirals within spirals, until his fingers bled. When the captain struck him to silence him, he only smiled, his teeth black. Light itself betrayed us. Lantern beams bent, leading us toward corridors that collapsed behind, trapping us in loops. Once we saw daylight ahead, a faint glow that beckoned like salvation. We ran, boots pounding, hearts hammering, lungs burning. When we reached it, it was the light of our own torches, reflected from behind. We had chased ourselves for hours. Men collapsed, weeping. Others screamed, firing into walls that bled ink and laughter. The worst came when we returned to camp, only to find it already occupied. Tents stood, torches burned, men moved in formation. But they were us, shadows of us exact. Each movement mirrored, each voice echoed. We watched them for hours, terrified to approach, until one of them turned and faced us. His face was mine, his mouth moved. I could not hear what he said. The captain ordered retreat. When we turned, the camp was gone, leaving only dust and stakes twisted into spirals. The map had shifted beyond salvation. Each march returned us to where we began. Each corridor bent into itself. We could not escape the spiral, and the whispers told us why. Ink does not leave the page. Ink does not step outside. Ink must fill the space allotted. Ink belongs within margin. Men broke then. Some gouged spirals into their flesh, hoping to match the map, to belong. Others lay down in silence, refusing to rise, their bodies vanishing into parchment as though accepted back into the page. The captain screamed until his throat bled, waving the parchment tube above his head, insisting that the emperor had written this, that we must endure. But even his voice bent now, folding back into itself, looping like the map, returning always to the same words: secure, establish, maintain, await. And the truth settled upon us heavier than hunger, heavier than exhaustion, heavier than fear. We were not moving through tunnels, we were being read aloud by something vast, and the map did not shift. The map was turning pages. The first sign came with the chronometers. They had been unreliable for weeks, spinning, stuttering, recording hours that did not match footsteps or hunger, but now they simply froze. Every dial, every cog, every flicker of light stopped, each one locking at a different number, as though time itself had been shattered into fragments too small to recognize. Men smashed their watches in frustration, but the fragments still ticked faintly, each one beating in rhythm with the pit's breath. Then the auspex strip stopped measuring hours altogether. Instead of coordinates or spirals, they printed only one word over and over in letters too large to ignore: night. The tech priest's replacement clawed at his own throat, shrieking that it had recorded not data but decree. And when the captain struck him to silence him, his final words echoed longer than his breath. The page had turned to night. We stumbled back to the surface to find the sky unchanged, yet unchanging. It dimmed slowly, as it had before, the grey shading darker until shapes blurred into silhouettes, until torches were lit, until eyes strained. But dawn did not come. Hours passed, then more, then more. The sky never lightened, the horizon never brightened. Shadows stretched but never shortened. We waited through what felt like 2 days, then 3, then 10. Still the world did not rise from its darkness. Lantern oil dwindled, torches burned low. The last of the glow globes sputtered and died. Men huddled together, clutching rifles, faces pale in the failing light. Some tried to measure shifts by counting breaths, by scratching lines into the dirt. But the scratches twisted into spirals when they looked away, and breaths grew uneven, sinking with the pit instead of hearts. Hunger gnawed sharper in the dark. Stomachs growled, but even the sound of emptiness was swallowed. Men tore at ration crates again, though we had known they were hollow. This time they found scraps inside, paper-thin slices that looked like bread, smelled like nothing, tasted of ash. Some devoured them anyway, lips blackening, teeth staining. They claimed it filled them. Their eyes glowed faintly with ink afterward. Sleep became terror, darkness within darkness. Men who closed eyes opened them to see only more night, endless night, pressing against lids like hands. Dreams ceased being separate from waking. Some swore they never slept at all, only shifted into deeper layers of night, each one heavier than the last. Others claimed they had slept for centuries and awoken to the same moment, unchanged. No one believed or disbelieved. Belief meant nothing where dawn was outlawed. The whispers grew louder, filling silence with syllables that pressed like hands against skulls. Ink does not know sunrise. Ink knows only shadow. Ink does not see light. Ink is red in dark. We stopped resisting them. We stopped trying to drown them with song or prayer. There was no song left, no prayer left. Only silence and whispers, and silence was worse. Men began lighting fires, not from oil or wood, but from themselves. One trooper cut strips of his uniform, soaked them in blood, lit them on bayonet tips. The flames burned black, casting no light, only shadows deeper than before. Another smeared his skin with ash and set himself alight, screaming hymns as his body dissolved into words that floated upward, glowing faintly until they vanished. The whispers cheered. Ink burns brightest when it accepts its sentence. The captain still clutched the parchment tube. His lips cracked, his voice raw, repeating the same 4 words even in the night that never ended. Secure, establish, maintain, await. His voice broke often, but he forced the syllables out, eyes bloodshot, veins standing out in his throat. Men no longer obeyed. Men no longer listened, but still he spoke, because silence would erase him faster. The medic wept openly, holding onto bones of the vanished, muttering that they had become the sun, that the sky refused to rise because it had swallowed them, that we were all feeding its light until none remained. He clawed at his own chest, begging to be burned for dawn, until the captain shot him. His body collapsed into dust that drifted upward, but the sky remained black. Days or nights passed. We could no longer tell. The horizon stayed sealed, endless dark pressing heavier each hour. Men muttered that the world had turned the page, that we were trapped between lines, that dawn was not forgotten but forbidden. The whispers confirmed it. Light was never written here. This is a night that does not end. The page is shadowed. You are a shadow. When one trooper finally screamed for the sun, his voice cracked the silence so deeply the fog itself recoiled. For a moment the horizon brightened faintly, a smear of light like a promise. We ran to it, hearts pounding, hope clawing, but when we reached it, it was only fire, our own torches reflected in a pool of ink. Men dropped to their knees, weeping, scooping handfuls, smearing it across faces like dawn. The ink whispered their names back. Their bodies collapsed, blank, gone. The captain did not stop repeating. Secure, establish, maintain, await. His voice rang hollow, swallowed by night, echoed by whispers until it no longer belonged to him. And we knew then, as the last torches died, as our eyes strained against a horizon that never shifted, that dawn would never return. The night had not fallen, it had been written, and once written, it could not be undone. The night had stretched too long, unbroken, absolute, so deep it erased even memory of light, until we no longer wondered when dawn would come, but whether it had ever existed. Men spoke less now, muttering only when whispers forced their throats open, for language itself had grown dangerous, every word a step closer to being rewritten. Hunger hollowed our bellies, thirst cracked our lips, fatigue broke our bones, but worse than all was the silence between whispers, the moments when the page seemed to pause, waiting for us to finish a sentence we had not begun. And then came the revelation. It arrived not as command, not as briefing, not as a commissar's bark or a captain's decree, but through the pit itself. The ground beneath our camp split, not violently but with deliberate grace, curling back like parchment peeled from binding. The earth folded outward in layers, revealing a surface beneath, smooth, flat, pale, inscribed with glyphs that pulsed in time with our heartbeats. We staggered back, rifles raised, torches trembling, but no enemy emerged. Instead, the whispers thickened, filling marrow, wrapping skulls, pressing into lungs until breath became speech. Ink does not ask why. Ink must know why. Ink was sent to the margin. Ink guards page. Ink guards page from turning. The words struck us all at once, not spoken into ears but inscribed directly into thought. Men dropped weapons, clutched heads, screamed until voices cracked. Some carved the words into their arms with knives, desperate to expel them, but the letters crawled across skin regardless, glowing faintly before fading back beneath flesh. Others fell silent entirely, eyes blank, lips moving in unison with whispers we could not hear. The captain alone stood tall, parchment tube clutched tight, his voice ragged as he shouted into the darkness. "We are guardsmen of the Emperor. We are not ink. We are his soldiers, not his scripture." The stone laughed. The whispers layered, rising until the cavern shook. "You were never soldiers. You were sent. You were offered. You were bound. Your assignment was not war. Your assignment was margin. Your emperor wrote you here." Men fell to their knees, retching black bile, vomiting strips of parchment that dissolved into dust. One trooper screamed. He remembered signing his name, remembered the quill scratching his fate into paper, remembered ink burning into flesh. Another wept, insisting he had never existed before the parchment arrived, that his memories of home, of childhood, of trenching and war were fabrications written to fill space. We tried to silence them, but their words echoed too true. The captain denied it still. He tore open the parchment tube, unrolled the orders, thrust them high for all to see. The words shimmered, shifting, rearranging, not orders, not directives, prison walls, sigils binding, instructions written not for men but for reality itself. Guard the boundary, hold the seal, maintain the silence, await the end. The captain dropped the page as though burned, his hands blistering, the letters seared into his palms. The truth spread like rot. We had not been sent to fight. We had not been sent to conquer. We had been stationed as prison guards, watchmen for something buried beneath, something vast, something patient. The assignment every guardsman fears was not a rumor, not a myth whispered at trench fires. It was real. It was us. The pit exhaled then, heavier than ever, and shapes stirred within. Not creatures, not domes. Something older, something formless yet infinite, pressing against the seal. The whispers grew clearer, layered yet unified, like a choir of 1,000 throats. The Emperor chained us here. You are his chains. You are his ink. You hold us bound. The chaplain's words returned to us, long after he had vanished into the fog. We are margins. We are ink. We are scripture. He had been right. He had been broken, because he had been right. We were not fighting an enemy. We were containing one. And with every vanishing, every erasure, every man dissolved into dust, the prison weakened, the page grew thinner, the boundary frayed. The captain wept openly, clutching his blistered hands, whispering denial, but denial could not smother revelation. The men muttered, then shouted, then wailed, voices rising until the cavern shook. Some begged forgiveness, some begged for release, some tore at their flesh, desperate to erase words already written within them. The medic's replacement slit his own throat, black ink spraying across the ground, glyphs blooming instantly where it fell. The whispers roared approval. Ink edits itself. Ink flows faster when it knows its role. The surface above collapsed further, folding outward like parchment unfurling. The sky split, not with light, not with dawn, but with black spirals stretching across stars. We saw chains of ink stretching upward into void, vast tendrils binding the horizon. They pulsed, cracked, bled. The whispers laughed. Chains thin, margins fade, readers hunger. One trooper dropped his rifle, staggered into the pit, arms wide, offering himself. He dissolved instantly, ash spiraling upward, joining the chains, patching them faintly. Another followed. then another. Some went willingly, believing themselves martyrs, believing sacrifice would hold the prison longer. Others had to be dragged back, screaming that they would not be eaten. The captain executed 3, but their bodies dissolved before bolts struck, dust spiraling upward, repairing chains momentarily. We understood then, our assignment had never been survival. It had never been a victory. It had been delayed. We were fodder, patchwork, ink used to thicken margins, lives spent line by line to bind something vaster than worlds. The Emperor had chained it once, but chains rot, seals thin, words fade. Regiments were sent not to win, but to be consumed, to feed the prison with their silence. The pit roared, the night shook, and we fell to our knees. The whispers pressed harder than ever, promising, demanding, stayed, hold, be ink, keep us bound. And in that moment, I envied the vanished, the blank, the men already erased, for they had completed their sentence. Their lines had ended. They were no longer being read, but we remained, words unfinished, ink still wet, sentences still stretching, waiting for the reader to turn the page. And the worst truth of all was this: we obeyed, not because of orders, not because of fear, but because there was no alternative. Because once written, a word cannot unwrite itself. The assignment Every Guardsman Fears was not legendary, it was a revelation, and we were living it, line by line, until the final margin collapsed. The first time we felt it, truly felt it, we mistook it for tremor, a quake of rock, the shiver of tectonic plates straining against each other far beneath the crust. But this world was not stone, not earth, not soil. It was flesh pretending to be such, veins masquerading as rivers, marrow wearing the mask of bedrock, and now that mask was slipping. The ground pulsed beneath our boots, slow, steady, deliberate, like the rise and fall of a giant chest. The world was breathing. At first we denied it. Denial was the last shield left to us. The captain shouted that it was atmospheric, that pressure beneath crust bent earth, that the Omnissiah's laws governed all things mechanical and natural. But the tech priest's replacement screamed that there was no crust here, no tectonics, no laws of physics. He pressed his ear to the ground and wept, begging us to listen. Against better judgment we did. And once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. The soil sighed like lungs, each exhale rolling through marrow, each inhale dragging thought inward, sucking language from skull. Hunger sharpened with the breath. Each exhale left us emptier, hollower, stomachs growling like caged beasts. Each inhale filled us not with sustenance, but with words, syllables we had not chosen, sentences crawling along tongues, begging to be spoken. Men clutched mouths shut, teeth grinding, lips bleeding. Some failed. They whispered fragments, muttering words none of us recognized, and the ground beneath them pulsed brighter in response. The medic's cot lay empty now, his replacements dead, his notes unreadable, but one journal fragment remained. He had scrawled with shaking hands, veins, veins in soil. Every drop of blood spilled soaks not earth, but arteries. We are not on ground, we are inside our bodies. He was right. Lanterns revealed streaks beneath dirt, glowing faint red, pulsing in rhythm with breath. We dug once, desperate for clarity, clawing through soil until we struck something slick, fibrous, wet. It quivered when touched. Blood spurted upward, black as ink spraying faces, staining uniforms. Men screamed. The captain ordered the hole filled. The whispers cheered. The fog pressed heavier at night, coiling low, clinging to ankles, dragging steps. It was not foggy. It was breathtaking. Condensation of lungs larger than mountains, seeping upward in steady rhythm. We realized this when it carried heat, steaming briefly before cooling. Inhale warmth. Exhale chill. The planet was alive. The planet was a prisoner. The planet was the thing we had been sent to guard, to hold, to bind, and every man realized it together. The chaplain had said once that we were margins, ink, scripture. He had been wrong, not margins, not scripture. We were shackles, shackles made of blood and flesh, placed here to keep this world from tearing its own bindings, and now the chains cracked. One trooper, mad with hunger, pressed his knife to the ground, carving shallow. The soil bled, thick rivulets pooling. He drank greedily, laughing as ink coated his lips. His laughter turned to screams. His skin split from within, veins glowing faintly, words crawling beneath like insects. We burned him alive, but his voice joined whispers, repeating, "It breathes, it breathes, it breathes, it breathes." The captain could no longer deny. He stood at camp center, parchment tube raised, face streaked with grime and tears. His voice cracked as he screamed that the Emperor himself had chained this beast, that our duty was to keep it bound, that if we faltered the galaxy would drown. He shouted until his throat bled. We did not answer, not because we disbelieved, but because belief no longer mattered. Duty was never a choice here. Duty was a sentence. The tunnels flexed now as we walked them, walls swelling with each inhale, collapsing with each exhale. Lanterns flickered, shadows swayed, glyphs rearranged themselves into lungs, into throats, into eyes. We marched inside anatomy. Each step sank slightly, the ground flexing, unwilling to be trampled. Some men swore they heard heartbeats beneath, slow and vast, each one rattling armor. Others claimed to hear chewing, as though the world gnawed upon our words. Sleep was worse. Dreams carried rhythm now, every mind shackled to breath. We dreamed lungs, ribs and throats. I dreamed myself standing upon a tongue that stretched into the horizon, words tattooed across its flesh, each letter my name, repeated, crossed out, rewritten. I woke up gagging, the taste of iron on my tongue. Others did not wake at all. They slept and were exhaled, their beds empty come morning, dust swirling faint as if they had only been breathed out of existence. The whispers grew clearer, no longer fragmented. We are bound, we breathe, we wait. You are chains, you are locked, you are silent. Break and we rise. The captain shot one trooper, who repeated the words aloud, but even the bolt round could not silence him. His blood sprayed the ground, and the soil inhaled it eagerly, glyphs glowing brighter. The whispers spoke his name for hours afterward. The truth spread like disease. The assignment every guardsman fears was not to guard a location, but to guard a prisoner. The world itself was alive, vast beyond comprehension, chained beneath ink and scripture, and we were stationed not as warriors but as locks, each life another shackle, each regiment another paragraph in a prison built of obedience. And the worst truth followed. Chains fail, locks rust, ink fades. This world had been bound too long, and our regiment was only the latest patchwork in an endless margin. The parchment in the captain's hands was not ordered. It was a reminder, a list of bindings repeated across centuries, a sentence still unfinished. As night pressed eternal, as hunger hollowed, as whispers filled marrow, every man felt the same terror. Our lines were thinning, our pages erasing, our shackles breaking. The world breathed heavier now, stronger, shaking tunnels with each exhale, pulsing walls until they bulged like veins ready to burst. And when it rose, when it tore free, when the page finally turned, we knew the assignment would not end. It would only be rewritten. It began slowly, as all madness does, too quiet to recognize until it had spread through every breath, every step, every heartbeat. The darkness had no dawn, the whispers had no pause, the hunger had no satisfaction, and the world's breath pressed heavier with every hour until our skulls rattled with rhythm not our own. It was not one man who broke, nor two, nor 10. It was all of us, splintered down the middle, each soul choosing a different path to survive the unendurable sentence written upon our marrow. Half of us embraced the page. Half of us tried to tear ourselves free of it. None succeeded. The first were the carvers. They used bayonets, knives, sharpened stones, anything with an edge, and they cut spirals into flesh. Arms, faces, chests, legs, each line deeper, each curve sharper, blood spilling in loops that glowed faintly as glyphs bloomed across the wounds. They knelt together in the dark, whispering prayers not to the emperor, but to the page itself, begging it to accept them, to write them properly, to make them part of the scripture, instead of footnotes waiting to be erased. Their skin turned pale, fibrous, letters crawling just beneath the surface, glowing whenever they breathed in rhythm with the pit. We feared them, but we also envied them, because their fear was gone. They smiled through pain, their mouths cracked wide, teeth blackened, whispering, "I am ink, I am writing, I cannot be erased if I belong." The second were the erasers. They gouged skin raw, tearing at arms and faces with nails, knives, teeth. They screamed that words lived beneath their flesh, that names crawled in veins, that sentences whispered through marrow. They clawed themselves bloody, ripping chunks of muscle, peeling strips of skin, trying to erase what had already been written. One man cut his own tongue, spitting blood and pulp, shrieking that no word would ever use his mouth again. He bled out, smiling, eyes blank, lips twitching in silence. Another tore his own shadow from the ground with bare hands, screaming until his throat tore, leaving him mute, collapsing lifeless as the shadow slithered back into stone. The erasers terrified us most, because their struggle felt truer than prayers, their screams closer to what we all wanted but could not admit, to be blank. The captain tried to stop them. His voice cracked, his last pistol smoked from executions, but still they carved, still they erased, still they tore themselves into scripture or silence. He dragged one carver before the regiment, demanded we witness discipline, and demanded obedience. The man's flesh glowed with spirals cut into chest, letters pulsing with every heartbeat. The captain shouted scripture, shouted orders, shouted the emperor's name. The carver only smiled, lifted arms, and whispered, "You are ink too, Captain. You just do not know what you say when you speak." The captain shot him. His body collapsed into parchment strips, scattering like leaves in the wind, each marked with words none of us could read. The whispers roared approval. The medics' replacements had all died, but men still sought healing, not from medicine, but from rewriting. They begged carvers to mark them, begged to be inscribed properly, believing that being part of the page would save them from erasure. Some resisted, clutching knives, screaming they would not be read, they would not belong, that they would erase themselves before the page could claim them. Fights broke out in darkness, fists slamming, knives plunging, rifles cracking. Brothers tore at brothers, each certain the other's choice was madness, each blind to his own. The tunnels shook with laughter, not ours, not voices, the stone itself. Glyphs pulsed brighter, blinking, rearranging into words we could not read, but knew were names, our names, written in sequences too vast to follow. The world fed on division, drank our madness, grew stronger with every scream. Its breath deepened, its sighs rattling tunnels, its whispers louder. Ink divides, ink edits, ink cuts. Pages tear faster when words fight themselves. One night the erasers gathered together, 30 men, half naked, flesh gouged raw, teeth broken, blood-soaking uniforms. They chanted in silence, mouths moving without sound, their eyes wild. Then they attacked the carvers, blades flashing, tearing spirals open, ripping flesh until both groups collapsed together in heaps of blood and ink. The whispers screamed in joy, the tunnels pulsed, and the ground drank everything. By dawn, or what would have been dawn had the world still allowed light, there was no trace of either group, only spirals cut into stone, still wet, still bleeding faintly. Those of us left stood broken between extremes. We did not carve, we did not erase, we watched, hollow, clutching rifles that felt weightless, whispering prayers that no longer held words. The captain wandered among us, eyes sunken, lips cracked, repeating the parchment orders until his voice was nothing but rasp. Secure, establish, maintain, await. The whispers mocked him louder. Men stopped listening. Men started laughing instead. The captain did not shoot them. He only wept. I watched one man sit silently, staring at his hand as if expecting it to vanish. Hours passed, then it did. Fingers crumbled into dust, palm hollowed, arm collapsing line by line until nothing remained. He never screamed, he never moved, he only whispered once, The sentence ends, and then he was gone. Mass insanity was not rebellion. It was not a failure. It was a revelation. The assignment Every Guardsman Fears was not designed to be survived. It was designed to break us, split us, rewrite us, consume us, half to ink, half to blankness, all to silence. And as we staggered onward, fewer each hour, madness gnawing marrow, whispers clawing skulls, hunger devouring thought, I knew this truth with certainty. The page was nearly full, the paragraph was ending, the reader was almost done, and when it turned the page, none of us would remain legible. The commissar had been gone for days, swallowed by the fog, erased mid-sentence, leaving only boots and dust, but even vanished, his presence lingered like the ghost of iron, a weight heavier than silence, a memory that disciplined us more fiercely than his pistol ever had. We still flinched at shadows as if his silhouette would step forth, bolt pistol raised, voice cracking with authority. We still whispered his name at night, not in mourning but in fear, because part of us believed he had not died, not vanished, but been edited into something sharper, something waiting in the margins to enforce orders we no longer understood. And then he returned. It was not a return like the others, no shadow stepping from fog, no figure forming in mist. He staggered into camp one endless night, his coat torn, his hat gone, his pistol clutched in a trembling hand. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated into black pits, lips cracked, skin pale as parchment. At first men rushed to him, relief flooding through them, desperate for authority, for iron, for any anchor. But when he opened his mouth, we recoiled. His voice was wrong. It was his voice, yes, but layered, doubled, stretched. His words carried weight, not of flesh, but of stone. He shouted scripture, but the scripture bent mid-verse, syllables curling into spirals, sentences folding upon themselves, until we heard the page more than the man. He raised his pistol high, declaring discipline would be restored, order maintained, heresy burned. Yet his hands shook, his eyes flickered, and for the first time, we saw fear etched upon him deeper than duty. He executed 3 men in his first hour back, not deserters, not heretics, not carvers or erasers, simply men who laughed when the whispers mocked him. He shot them point blank, their skulls blooming into black dust, but their voices lingered, mocking louder, echoing his commands back at him until he covered his ears, teeth bared, veins bulging. He screamed for silence, but silence would not come. That night he paced the camp endlessly, boots striking ground in rhythm with the world's breath. He muttered names again, names of the vanished, names of the executed, names of men still alive. Over and over, the list grew longer, until he whispered his own. When he reached it, he froze. His hand trembled on the pistol grip. His lips quivered. He said it again and again, louder each time, as though daring the page to erase him. The whispers answered, name spoken is name erased, name repeated is name consumed. He screamed until his throat tore, firing wildly into the night, bolts swallowed by fog, flames sputtering into black. We watched, silent, rifles clutched, hunger gnawing, fear burning. No one moved to stop him. No one dared, because we saw what he was: not enforcer, not commander, not shield. He was a prisoner, same as us. He had always been a prisoner. On the 5th day of his return, he gathered us at the edge of the pit. His face was pale, his eyes ringed with shadow, his voice hoarse. He told us he had seen the truth in the fog, that he had heard the reader itself. He confessed that every order he had ever given, every execution he had ever carried out, every word of discipline spoken, all had been written already. He had been no commissar. He had been a line. He had been ink, nothing more. His authority had never belonged to him. It had been the pages all along. He raised his pistol, pressed it beneath his chin, whispered the last order of his life: secure, establish, maintain, await. Then he pulled the trigger. The bolt cracked his skull into black mist, his body collapsing in silence. The whispers screamed his name, louder than any before, echoing down tunnels, up into fog, across the night that never ended. Glyphs along the walls rearranged instantly, spelling his name in loops and spirals. For hours afterward, the ground shook with laughter. The page was pleased. We stood in silence, watching his dust drift downward into the abyss. No one moved to burn him. No one muttered prayer. No one saluted, because his death was no victory. It was only confirmation. The commissar had been the last fulcrum, the last weight upon discipline, the last iron voice, and even he had broken, not at our hands, not at the enemy's hands, but at his own. His pistol had not executed deserters or heretics this time. It had executed itself. It had executed the illusion that obedience meant anything here. We were no longer soldiers. We were no longer regiment. We were no longer men. We were ink, scattered, lines unfinished, sentences fraying, and now the page had erased the last authority we clung to. The commissar's fear had been ours all along. He had only carried it longer, and when he finally broke, we realized something worse than death, worse than madness, worse than erasure. The page does not need commissars. It only needs words, and soon even words would be unnecessary. It began with rhythm, not the shallow breathing we had felt through boots for weeks, not the slow pulse that had throbbed through tunnels, but something heavier, deeper, vast beyond comprehension. At first it was faint, a tremor rolling through marrow, rattling teeth, quivering rifles. Then it grew stronger, shaking stakes from ground, toppling tents, splitting earth in jagged seams. The pit was no longer sighing. The pit was stirring. The prisoner was awakening. The captain shouted orders through a cracked throat, his voice drowned instantly by the roar of shifting stone. Secure, establish, maintain, await. The words meant nothing now. Men did not listen. Men clutched ears, shrieking as whispers thundered louder than command. Ink frays, margins tear, sentence ends, page turns. The ground groaned, the tunnels flexed, walls swelling outward like ribs expanding, glyphs glowing blood red in sync with tremors. We staggered, rifles raised, but against what? Against stone that quaked like lungs, against walls that bled with every exhale, against chains cracking overhead in the sky too black to contain. The first collapse swallowed a squad whole. One moment they stood in formation at cordon's edge, weapons ready, lips pressed tight against whispers. The next, the ground beneath them yawned wide, earth splitting with deliberate precision, folding open like parchment peeled from the spine. They tumbled into abyss, screams cut short as blackness surged upward, devouring light. Their torches winked out, their voices muffled, their names spoken back instantly by the stone, repeated until they blurred into echo. Then silence, only dust rising, spiraling upward before vanishing into glyphs above. The fog thickened with heat now, steaming, damp, carrying the stench of blood and iron. It clung to skin, soaking uniforms, smearing weapons in slick grime. Men coughed black, spitting ink, lungs burning as if smoke filled them. Yet there was no fire, only breath, only exhale. Each cough echoed back from fog in voices that were not ours. Each gasp answered with laughter. We fled deeper into tunnels, though deeper had no meaning. Every corridor bent, every chamber twisted, every spiral rearranged. Glyphs scrawled across walls shifted as we passed, pulsing brighter, letters screaming, words we could not read but felt in narrow. Chains break, locks rot, sentence ends. We staggered forward regardless, clinging to motion, clinging to rifles that hummed faint, clinging to scraps of discipline long dead. Then came the first chain breaking. We saw it not above, but below, deep in a pit where black spirals curved into void. A glyph cracked, fissures splitting outward, light seeping through, a light not of sun, not of fire, but of something vast and raw, burning white and red, pulsing like muscle exposed. The glow widened, veins splitting, walls trembling, dust falling in torrents. The whispers screamed in chorus, jubilant. Chain breaks, margin torn, reader freed. The captain fell to knees, clutching a parchment tube, tears streaking grime. He shouted denial, shouted faith, shouted the Emperor's name. But his voice was drowned instantly by the quake that toppled us all, splitting floor beneath boots, hurling rifles aside. The parchment glowed in his hands, letters rearranging into chains, glowing bright, burning flesh. He screamed, refusing to drop it, as glyphs seared through his arms, his chest, his face. When we dragged him back, half his skin bore spirals etched deep, glowing faint. He wept, whispering, "I am chain, I am locked, I am page." Men panicked then. Some dropped rifles, clawing upward, desperate for surface, desperate for sky, even black sky, away from Pitt's breath. Others knelt, pressing foreheads to the ground, whispering prayers not to the Emperor, but to the prisoner, begging it to rise, begging it to end. Fights erupted instantly, brothers clawing brothers, knives flashing, bolts fired wildly, screams echoed, bodies collapsed, blood soaking into ground, glyphs blooming instantly where it fell. The whispers roared in hunger. Ink flows faster when cut. Ink seals are weaker when torn. Another chain broke, higher this time, carved into the cavern wall, pulsing bright before snapping like a tendon under a blade. The sound rattled skulls, deafened ears, shattered torches. Darkness rushed in, swallowing light, until only a glow of glyphs remained. We staggered blind, clutching each other, voices cracking in terror. No one commanded, no one obeyed. The assignment had dissolved into madness. We reached a chamber vast as a cathedral, ceiling lost, walls trembling. At center lay the heart of it, the pit's throat, wide, gaping, glowing faint, with every inhale, trembling with every exhale. Glyphs spiraled downward, chains etched into walls, glowing faint, cracking wider each breath. The whispers screamed louder than ever, layered until ears bled. We rise, we rise, we rise. Men broke entirely then. Some hurled themselves into the abyss willingly, arms wide, screaming they would bind it with flesh. They vanished instantly, ash spiraling upward, chains glowing faint, brighter for a heartbeat before dimming again. Others turned rifles inward, firing upon comrades, insisting silence was the only way to hold the page closed. Bodies collapsed, blood sprayed, glyphs drank eagerly, glowing stronger. The commissar had been iron, the chaplain had faith, the captain had been ordered. All had shattered. Now only madness reigned. The ground split wider, tremors shook so hard we fell to knees, ears ringing, eyes blind. Then we felt it, not whispers, not breath, not tremors, touch, vast, deliberate, fingers pressing upward through stone, vast and slow, curling as if stretching after millennia of stillness. The prisoner stirred, and in that moment, every guardsman alive understood truth deeper than hunger, deeper than fear, deeper than duty. The assignment every guardsman fears was never survival, never victory, never even obedience. It was delayed. We were here to buy time, line by line, regiment by regiment, feeding ink into margin so the galaxy could breathe one sentence longer. And now the sentence is ending. The pit was awakening, the page was turning, the reader was ready. The Vox had been failing for days, its static too dense, its echoes too layered with the voices of the dead. But as the pit tore wider and chains cracked louder, the captain clutched the set with bloodied hands and screamed for it to be powered. The auspex sputtered sparks, the antenna bent, the dials spun uselessly, but we obeyed. Not because we believed it could work, not because we trusted his command, but because desperation makes slaves of us all. If the pit was awakening, if the prisoner was tearing free, then perhaps, just perhaps, warning another regiment would give our ending meaning. The Vox officer was already gone, torn apart in mass insanity, but one of the carvers volunteered. His flesh bore spirals cut deep, letters glowing faint along his arms. He grinned through broken teeth as he twisted dials, muttering prayers not to the Emperor, but to the machine. Sparks burned him, metal seared his palms, but still he worked, whispering, "Ink transmits. Ink is a signal. Ink is a message." We feared him, but no one stopped him. Fear was useless now. Static cleared for the first time in weeks, shrill and piercing, rattling skulls. The captain seized handset, his blistered palms bleeding onto metal, voice ragged as he screamed into void. He did not give coordinates. He did not give status. He did not even name the regiment. He shouted only warning, "Do not land here. Do not answer orders. This world is alive. This world is prisoner. We are not soldiers. We are chains. Leave us. Burn this place from orbit before it breathes free." His words echoed back instantly, repeated in whispers, layered in tones of vanished men. The machine laughed, vox crackling louder. Then a voice answered, not from orbit, not from ships above, but from the stone itself, transmitted through wires, through antenna, through marrow. Message received, message edited. We heard it replayed at once. His warning rewritten. Land here, obey orders, secure, establish, maintain, await. It repeated, looping endlessly, layered in the voices of every guardsman already erased. The captain screamed denial, shouted into vox until his throat tore, blood-spraying handset. But no matter how he spoke, the machine twisted words into obedience. No warning left our lips unbroken. No plea reached beyond the page. The reader had already edited us. The carver laughed, teeth black, arms glowing. "It cannot be stopped," he whispered. "Every word belongs to it. Every message is already written." He pressed his hand to the transmitter, whispered something none of us understood. His body dissolved instantly into dust, sucked through the antenna, spiraling upward into the sky. The machine roared with static, louder than quake, louder than whispers, then silence. The vox smoked, wires melted, casing cracked. The captain dropped handset, knees buckling, eyes hollow. He wept openly, clutching a parchment tube tighter than ever, whispering that he had tried, that he had warned, that he had disobeyed the page, that perhaps the Emperor would see effort. But we knew the truth. His message had not gone out. His warning had been consumed. The galaxy would never hear. The galaxy would only send more ink. Some men broke instantly, firing rifles into the sky, bolts vanishing into fog. Others collapsed to their knees, weeping, muttering that their deaths meant nothing, that no one would remember, that even a warning was stolen. One trooper slit his own throat, black blood spraying, glyphs blooming instantly where it fell. The whispers roared in approval, sentence revised, message erased, paragraph continues. I sat in the dark, clutching a rifle, stomach hollow, lips cracked, mind fraying. I realized then that even this thought was not my own. Even this despair had been written. My hand trembled, but words crawled across skin anyway, sentences forming in scars I had not cut. I tried to scrape them away, but more appeared, pulsing faint with the breath of the pit. The last vox message had been sent. It had been erased. It had been rewritten. And now we were nothing more than footnotes, waiting to be edited into silence. The pit groaned louder, tremors shaking ground, chains snapping one by one. The prisoner stirred, closer, heavier, hungrier. The page was turning, and no one would ever know. The vox lay in ruins, casing split, wires melted, antenna sagging like broken bones, the air still stinking of burned metal and blood, but worse than its silence was what followed. We had grown so used to static, so used to distortion, so used to voices not ours screaming through channels, that when silence lingered, true silence, unbroken, unmocked, it pressed heavier than any whisper. It was not absent, it was judgment. Above us, orbit had always felt distant, unreachable, yet reassuring, because as long as ships lingered, there was chain above chain, iron above parchment, command above regiment. We told ourselves they watched, that they waited, that relief would come when orders turned, that perhaps our warning, even rewritten, would raise suspicion. But when silence settled, deeper than fog, heavier than tremor, we knew the truth. They had left. We staggered outside tunnels, boots dragging, rifles limp, eyes straining against night that had never lifted. At horizon faint glimmers moved, engines flaring, silhouettes vast, hulls black against black. We knew them by shape, by memory, by prayer. Imperial voidcraft, banners of Aquila once draped upon them like wings. Now they rose, higher, further, shrinking into nothing. No message sent, No signal given. They turned slowly, deliberately, abandoning orbit. Some men screamed, sprinting toward the horizon, as though legs could chase starships, as though arms could drag them back. Others dropped to knees, howling denial, fists pounding earth until knuckles split. A few laughed, bitter and sharp, shouting that they had expected it all along, that the Emperor had not abandoned us because he had never written to us at all. Their laughter bent into sobs, then silence. The captain watched with hollow eyes. A parchment tube, clutched so tight blood ran from blisters across palms. He did not scream. He did not deny. He only whispered, they must leave. That is the only way to bind it. That is the only way to keep the margin closed. His voice cracked, but he forced words out, as though saying them kept his sanity. We are the chains. We are silent. Our relief is abandonment. This was always the assignment. His truth tore us worse than betrayal. We had believed we were soldiers waiting for relief, martyrs awaiting salvation. Instead, our final duty was desertion. Desertion not of us, but by them. We were not meant to be saved. We were meant to be sealed. Ships would not burn the world. Ships would not rescue us. Ships would leave, and by leaving, they would lock page shut, knowing we would vanish line by line until nothing remained. The fog pressed tighter, curling between us, coiling like script binding margins. We felt the chains crack above, heard their echoes through the void, saw glimmers vanish into endless darkness. Men clawed at the sky, nails breaking, throats bleeding with screams that carried no sound. Others pressed faces to ground, whispering thanks that duty had meaning, that death had purpose. The division sharpened again, half begging to be erased, half begging to survive. Neither mattered. One trooper fired a rifle skyward, bolts sizzling into void. Another dragged him down, beating him until face collapsed, whispering, "Do not call them back. Do not give them reason to return. This is our sentence. Let it be read." They tore each other apart, blood soaking ground, glyphs pulsing brighter with every drop. The whispers laughed. Ink consumes itself. Ink edits itself. Ink delays the page longer when it dies, fighting itself. We stayed long at the cordon, staring upward at the sky that no longer carried salvation. One by one, men slumped into silence, heads bowed, rifles limp. I stared until my eyes burned, waiting for the flicker of engines, glimmering of return. Nothing. Only black. Only endless nights. Only silence. The captain staggered before us, face pale, lips cracked, eyes streaming. He raised a parchment tube with trembling arms, voice breaking. They have left us because they must. They have sealed us because they must. We are not forgotten. We are not betrayed. We are assignment fulfilled. We are writing sentences. We are chains that bind. This is glory. This is an honor. This is our Emperor's will. Men did not cheer. Men did not answer. Men only wept quietly, for they knew his words were lies he forced upon himself, lies he clung to, because truth was unbearable. We were not glorious. We were not honored. We were sacrificed. We were fuel. We were silence wrapped in flesh. The last ships vanished fully, engines dimming, trails dissolving. The horizon sagged under the weight of night. No one spoke for hours, not whispers, not prayers, not screams, only silence, heavy, final. And in that silence, the pit laughed, not whispered, laughed, a sound vast and deep rolling through earth, rattling teeth, shaking marrow. They abandon you, because abandonment is a chain. They leave you because leaving binds us longer. They sacrifice you because sacrifice is ink. And you accept, you accept, you accept. We had always known, deep in marrow, deep in breath, deep in silence, we had always known, the assignment, every guardsman fears, ends not in rescue, it ends in abandonment, and the page turns slower, satisfied, savoring, knowing we have no lines left to write. The night had no end, the sky no light, the pit no silence, and the whispers no pause. The orbiting ships had left, their engines flickering into black, their hulls shrinking into nothing, abandoning us in the sentence we had always been doomed to finish. The commissar was gone, executed by his own hand. The chaplain was gone, preaching his last sermon into fog that swallowed him whole. The medic was gone, scrawling journals until his flesh became the parchment he feared. The captain alone remained, clutching his blistered hands around the parchment tube, whispering words he no longer believed, repeating orders that no longer commanded, praying to chains that were cracking one by one above and below. But no regiment survives on hollow prayers and vanished officers. No regiment survives when maps shift, rations dissolve, and the sun itself is erased from the page. We were guardsmen in name alone now, no longer soldiers, no longer men, no longer even voices. We were ghosts penned into margins, words stuttering in darkness, ink fading from line to line. And when men cease to be soldiers, when fear outweighs obedience, when silence outweighs command, collapse does not come slowly. It comes all at once, like a wall splitting down its center, dust rising, chains snapping. It began with rations, as always. Hunger had hollowed us for weeks, sharpening ribs into knives, cracking lips into bleeding fissures, leaving bellies clawing against spines. The world itself breathed hunger into us, sighs pressing into marrow, each inhale dragging sustenance from lungs. We had tried to chew dust, to drink fog, to devour soil that tasted of parchment and blood. We had tried to eat each other, finding flesh already written into ink, collapsing into dust upon tongue. There was nothing left to consume, nothing but each other's will. One squad rose in the night, knives drawn, eyes burning. They attacked without warning, lunging at comrades huddled near the lantern's sputter. They did not strike for flesh. They struck for parchment tubes, for orders still clutched by captain, believing words within were sustenance, believing ink itself could be eaten. Blood sprayed, bolts cracked, screams tore silence into pieces. Men clawed each other apart, bones splitting, skin tearing, blood soaking into soil that pulsed brighter with each drop. Glyphs bloomed instantly, glowing red, feeding upon slaughter. The whispers roared with hunger, jubilant. Ink devours itself, ink edits itself. Ink binds longer when words fight words. The captain tried to intervene, raising the pistol with trembling hands, shouting orders cracked with desperation. Secure, establish, maintain, await. His voice drowned instantly beneath screams, drowned beneath laughter, drowned beneath whispers louder than artillery. He fired once, twice, 3 times, killing men who had followed him for years. Their bodies collapsed into parchment strips that curled, dissolved, and rose into fog. The whispers repeated his words back at him, mocking, layered, secure, establish, maintain, await. He fell to knees, pistol clattering, tears streaking grime. By dawn, though dawn no longer came, half the regiment lay dead, their blood gone, their bodies erased, their names whispered endlessly by stone. The survivors staggered in silence, rifles limp, eyes hollow. They did not mourn, they did not bury, they did not pray. They only breathed, waiting for the next fracture, next collapse, next erasure. It came swiftly. The carvers returned first, flesh etched with spirals, skin glowing faintly, mouths whispering hymns to page. They no longer hid their faith. They no longer begged silence. They preached openly, shouting scripture written across their ribs, screaming joy as they bled, dancing in circles carved into dirt. They declared themselves chosen, declared themselves margins made holy, declared themselves eternal. They marched into camp, arms wide, demanding conversion. Those who refused were dragged, knives carving glyphs into skin, blood spilling as men wept and screamed. Some broke instantly, begging to be written properly. Others fought, firing rifles into glowing chests, watching bodies dissolve into parchment that fluttered back to stone. The whispers cheered. The erasers rose in response, those who had gouged themselves raw, those who had torn skin until words fled. They charged into camp, knives drawn, tearing at carvers, ripping spirals open, clawing at glowing wounds until flesh split. Screams tore through tunnels, blood sprayed into air, glyphs pulsed brighter with every strike. Carvers sang, erasers shrieked, the pit groaned louder, tremors rattling walls. We stood between them, caught in war not of soldiers but of madness, caught in slaughter of faith and silence, watching brothers butcher brothers, friends gouge comrades, companions carve family. Rifles cracked, blades clanged, fists smashed teeth, boots crushed skulls. The dark became red, the soil became pulp, the whispers became thunder. Ink divides, ink tears, ink devours, chains break faster when words eat words. The captain no longer commanded. He sat in dirt, clutching a parchment tube, rocking like a child, whispering orders with lips cracked, blood dripping from blisters. Secure, establish, maintain, await. His voice drowned instantly. Men no longer looked at him. Men no longer cared. The regiment had collapsed. The regiment had become riotous. The regiment had become a sacrifice, feeding Pitt's laughter. I tried to stop it once. I raised my rifle, screamed for silence, shouted for order. My voice cracked, hollow, ignored. A trooper lunged at me, knife flashing. I shot him through the chest, his body splitting into dust instantly, spirals glowing on the ground where he had fallen. Another charged me, bayonet raised, eyes wide, mouth open in him. I shot him too. Dust, glow, whisper. My hands shook, my vision blurred, my ears rang with laughter. I dropped the rifle, wept, and fell to my knees. There was no stopping it. Collapse had written itself. Hours blurred into night, night into silence, silence into whispers. By time screams ended. Less than a quarter of us remained. We stood in the ruins of camp, boots soaked, uniforms shredded, rifles empty. Our eyes met across darkness, hollow, exhausted, broken. There was no hatred left, no discipline, no prayer, only hunger, only silence, only dread. The whispers cheered, louder than ever. The regiment collapses, regiment frays, regiment ends, ink consumed, sentence near finished. The pit groaned louder, chains cracking, glyphs pulsing, tremors shaking tunnels. The prisoners stirred beneath, closer now, hungrier, hungrier, hungrier. The captain rose finally, staggering pale, trembling. He raised a parchment tube, arms wide, tears streaming. He shouted the final truth, his voice breaking. This was always the purpose. This was always duty. We are chains. We are silent. We are nothing but fuel. Collapse is not failure. It is sacrifice. We have delayed page one more sentence, one more paragraph, one more moment for the galaxy. He wept, body trembling, arms shaking. None answered, none obeyed. We only stared, hollow, broken, because we knew he was right. And collapse was not betrayal, it was destiny. The assignment every guardsman fears had always ended this way, not with victory, not with survival, not even with death. It ended with collapse, regiment turning inward, tearing itself apart, bleeding itself into margins, feeding chains one last time before the page turned. And as we staggered in silence, less than a quarter alive, rifles limp, uniforms torn, whispers thundering, pit groaning, chains snapping, collapse was complete. The regiment was gone. We were no longer soldiers. We were no longer men. We were only ink. The page was ready. The pit no longer sighed, no longer pulsed, no longer whispered through stone. It roared, a sound vast enough to split marrow, to crack teeth in jaws, to turn every thought into splintered shards of noise. The chains above snapped one by one, each breaking like a tendon under a knife, shuddering the horizon with thunder. The chains below burst in bursts of light, glyphs bleeding crimson until they tore themselves apart. And in the silence between cracks, we felt it moving, not breathing, not tremor, movement. Something vast, shifting upward, pressing through earth, tearing scripture into shreds as it clawed free of its binding. We staggered at the rim. What remained of us, Less than a quarter of a regiment, eyes hollow, rifles limp. No officer spoke, no commissar barked, no chaplain preached. The captain clutched his parchment tube still, arms trembling, face streaked with tears, lips bleeding from repetition. Secure, establish, maintain, await. He whispered it through cracked teeth. Even now, even here, though his voice drowned instantly beneath the roar of the pit. The ground split wide, spiraling downward, layers peeling back like parchment torn from book spine. Earth curled outward, soil unraveling, tunnels folding open until nothing remained but abyss. Glyphs spiraled along walls, glowing so bright they burned eyes, screaming words none of us understood yet felt in marrow. We clutched heads, shrieking, ears bleeding, as symbols burned into skulls. We rise, we rise, we rise. Then we saw it. At first, only shadow, rising from depth, vast and shapeless, blacker than night, swallowing torchlight, devouring glow. Then detail, flesh not flesh, stone not stone, surfaces slick with ink, veins glowing faint, eyes opening across skin in spirals, blinking in rhythm too many to count, each one gazing upward, each one gazing into us. They blinked in unison, and every man screamed, for in that blink we saw ourselves written inside, faces carved into pupils, names scrawled across irises, our entire regiment mirrored in gaze. It rose higher, breath shaking horizon, exhale knocking men to knees, inhale dragging fog into chest. Its arms unfolded, vast stretching, fingers curling into the sky. Each finger bore glyphs etched into flesh, each knuckle scarred with chains cracked open. It clawed upward, tearing remnants of prison, shredding margins, erasing seals. Its head, or what we thought head, emerged last, a crown of glyphs, glowing spirals spinning, mouth yawning wide, not jaws, not teeth, but page splitting open, parchment peeling outward, voice roaring from every torn syllable. We are free. We are sentences unfinished. We are words without margin. Men broke instantly. Some dropped rifles, screaming prayers to the emperor through cracked lips, begging light, begging salvation, begging dawn. None came. Others sprinted into fog, knives slashing, clawing at skin, desperate to erase themselves before gaze consumed them. They collapsed in dust, whispers cheering. Others still hurled themselves into the abyss willingly, arms wide, chanting in joy as bodies dissolved into spirals, feeding prisoners willingly. I stood frozen, rifle limp, heart hammering, eyes streaming. My mouth moved without command, whispering words I had never learned, syllables thick with ink. I tried to stop, tried to bite my tongue, tried to silence myself, but the words crawled upward regardless. My shadow moved before me, lips whispering faster, smiling wide. The captain rose then, staggering, arms trembling, parchment tube clutched tight. His voice broke as he screamed into a roar. You cannot rise, you cannot break. You are still a prisoner. You are bound by the emperor's word. You are bound by our sacrifice. We are chains, we are silent, we are ink that seals. His arms shook, tubes glowing bright, glyphs searing across chest. He pressed it against chest, screaming until voice cracked, blood spraying lips. Take me if it binds you longer. The thing bent low, shadow covering camp, eyes blinking in unison, mouth yawning wider. Its roar drowned all sound, all thought, all prayer. The captain vanished instantly, body dissolving into dust, parchment tube burning bright before shattering. Chains flared across walls briefly, glowing with his sacrifice. For one heartbeat, one instant, the world held. The whispers shrieked in fury. Ink delays, ink denies, ink binds. Then chains snapped again, louder, heavier, final. The thing rose higher, tearing fully free, shaking the horizon, sky splitting, stars bending. Its body stretched into void, vast infinite spirals wrapping across cosmos, glyphs burning like constellations. It reached upward, arms wide, mouth roaring. We are free, we are free. We are free. Men collapsed in silence, ears bleeding, eyes blind, throats raw. We had no words left. We had no voices left. We were dust waiting to spiral. And I knew then, as it roared louder than thunder, as the horizon cracked, as night grew endless, that the assignment every guardsman fears was never survival, never victory, never even abandonment. It was this moment. This is rising. This birth. We had fuel. We had been in chains. We had been binding prisoners to the margin, and now the margin was torn, page was turned, and the reader was free. The thing had risen, and our sentence was over. The thing towered above us, vast and endless, no shape that flesh could name, no form that mind could frame, its body stretching across horizon and void alike, flesh written in spirals of glyphs, eyes blinking in unison, mouth yawning wider than sky, its roar drowning marrow, erasing prayer. It had risen. The chains lay shattered, the prison lay broken, and all that remained was us. We staggered among ruins of camp, less than a dozen where once had been thousands, boots dragging, rifles limp, uniforms shredded, eyes hollow. No captain remained, no commissar remained, no chaplain remained, no medic remained. We were not a regiment, we were not soldiers, we were remnants, lines unfinished, ink smudged, words fading, yet the whispers did not leave us. They pressed harder, louder, heavier, curling through marrow, filling lungs, forcing syllables from lips. Final assignment, final margin, final duty. Ink must finish the sentence. One by one, men dropped rifles, fell to knees, pressed foreheads to soil that pulsed with breath. They whispered names, voices hollow, throats cracked. Their bodies collapsed into dust instantly, spiraling upward, feeding things raw. Chains did not reform, prison did not bind, but the page turned slower, savoring. Their sacrifice did not stop it. Their sacrifice only fed it. I clutched my rifle, trembling, vision blurred, tears streaking grime. My hands shook, my lips bled, my voice cracked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to erase myself before gaze consumed me, but my shadow moved before I did, lips whispering faster, smiling wider, words spilling like ink. I could not stop it. I could not silence it. I could only obey. The whispers thundered louder. You were never meant to win. You were never meant to survive. You were meant to delay. You were meant to fuel. You were meant to end, as all words end, consumed, erased, forgotten. I staggered forward, boots sinking into soil that pulsed like lungs, rifle clattering from hands. I felt weight lift as fear dissolved. Duty remained, duty alone, not to the emperor, not to the regiment, not to the galaxy. Duty to page, duty to finish sentences, duty to offer myself as final word. I reached the edge of the pit. Abyss yawned, vast glowing spirals spinning, glyphs pulsing. I closed my eyes, whispered my last prayer, not to the emperor, not to chain, not to dawn, to silence. Erase me clean, leave no mark, let nothing remain. I stepped forward. The fall was instant, the breath was endless, the silence is complete, and in the final heartbeat, final whisper, final erasure, I knew the truth deeper than hunger, deeper than fear, deeper than duty. The assignment every guardsman fears was never about holding, never about resisting, never about fighting. It was about ending line by line, regiment by regiment, until the final sentence consumed itself, until the final word erased, until the page turned and nothing remained. The thing had risen. The reader was free. The page was finished. We were the final assignment, and we were gone. If you were trapped in the Emperor's service, sent to a nameless world to guard a prisoner older than history, knowing your only purpose was to be erased line by line, would you obey, or would you break? Like this tale, subscribe for more grim dark horrors, and share it if you dare spread the whispers of the assignment.